Have you noticed that comfort never feels like danger? That's the design flaw in your nervous system. It was built to seek safety, not greatness. It rewards you for shrinking, for staying still, for choosing the familiar over the necessary. Carl Jung warned that what you don't confront controls you. Comfort is the thing you stopped confronting. This is not a feel-good video. This is a diagnosis. Comfort does not look like weakness. That's what makes it dangerous. It looks like rest. It looks like self-care. It looks like a reasonable person making a reasonable decision to slow down, just for tonight, just this once. But comfort is not a place. Comfort is a transaction, and every single time you take it, you're paying for it with a currency you cannot see disappearing, your standard. Your brain was not built to make you great. Nobody told you that in school. Nobody told you that in the self-help book you skimmed and never finished. Your brain was built for one job and one job only, to keep you alive long enough to pass on your genes. That's it. That's the entire mission statement. Not excellence, not legacy, survival. And to a brain wired for survival, the unfamiliar is not exciting, it's a threat. The gym is a threat. The cold shower is a threat. The hard conversation, the business you haven't started, the body you haven't built, all of it registers on some primitive level as danger. So your mind does what it was designed to do. It protects you. It pulls you back toward the fire, back toward the cave, back toward the bed. It calls this protection comfort. You call it rest. Carl Jung would have called it something else. He would have called it your shadow, the part of you that you refuse to look at directly, so instead it runs your life from the dark, disguised as common sense. You tell yourself you're being responsible, balanced, reasonable, but underneath every reasonable excuse is the same primitive circuitry whispering the same primitive command: stay small, stay safe, stay unseen. Here is the diagnosis. Sit with it. You are not lazy. Laziness would almost be a relief, a simple flaw you could fix with enough willpower. What you actually have is a nervous system in open rebellion against your own ambition. Every time you choose the couch over the work, the scroll over the study, the silence over the hard conversation, that is not a character flaw. That is your biology executing its oldest program, and you are letting it drive. Marcus Aurelius understood this 2,000 years before neuroscience gave it a name. He wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and that a man who does not rule his own mind will spend his entire life ruled by it. He was not writing poetry. He was writing a warning. Missing a hard choice once is a mistake. Your body absorbs it, corrects, moves on. But missing it twice, on purpose, with full awareness, that is no longer a mistake. That is the birth of a new identity, a weaker one, and it will ask for a third time and a fourth. It will not stop asking because you have taught it that asking works. So stop calling it a rough week. Stop calling it self-care. Look directly at what it is: a slow, voluntary surrender dressed up in language soft enough that you never have to feel the weight of what you're actually losing. That is what comfort does. Not with a single dramatic collapse, with 1,000 small extinguishings so quiet you mistake the growing dark for how it's always been. Look at the diagnosis plainly one more time before we move forward. You skip the workout and tell yourself tomorrow is a fresh start. You skip the hard conversation and tell yourself the timing wasn't right. You skip the deep work and tell yourself you needed to rest. Every one of those sentences sounds reasonable in isolation. Stacked together across a year, they are not reasonable. They are a pattern, and a pattern is just a future you've already written, whether you meant to sign it or not. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal precisely because he understood this. He was not writing to inspire anyone. He was writing to catch himself in the act of lying to himself over and over until the lying became visible enough to correct. That is the entire function of a diagnosis, not to shame you, but to make the invisible pattern visible enough that you can finally do something about it. So here is the command, and it is simple on purpose. Stop rounding your excuses up to reasonable. Call the skipped workout what it is. Call the avoided conversation what it is. Name the pattern out loud today before it names you. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable, because comfort is not only physical. The version that will actually end your future is social. You have built a mask. Jung called it the persona, the face you show the world because the real one felt too dangerous to expose. And somewhere along the way, you stopped taking the mask off. You forgot it was ever separate from you. You smile when you feel resentment. You call it professionalism. You agree when you disagree. You call it being easygoing. You shrink your opinions in rooms where they might cost you approval, and you call it humility. None of that is humility. That is comfort, wearing a disguise so convincing that even you believe it. Ask yourself the question you've been avoiding. When was the last time you said something true and unpopular in a room that mattered? Not online, where disagreement is cheap and consequence-free. In a room, to a face. When was the last time your words cost you something? If you cannot remember, that is your diagnosis. You have optimized your entire personality for approval, and you have called the resulting emptiness being well-liked. Here is the part nobody warns you about. Jung did not believe healing made you peaceful. He believed it made you dangerous. Dangerous to the arrangement you'd made with everyone around you, the quiet agreement that you would stay small so they could stay comfortable too. The moment you stop performing, you become unpredictable to people who built their own comfort around your predictability. That's why growth feels like betrayal at first. Not because you're doing something wrong, because you're breaking a contract nobody ever said out loud. Look at the mask honestly for one moment, not with shame. Shame is just another form of hiding. Look at it with the cold clarity of a diagnosis. Where did you build it? Who taught you that your real face wasn't safe to show? You built it in 100 small negotiations. A joke you laughed at but didn't find funny. A goal you didn't share because you were afraid of the silence that would follow. A version of your future you kept quiet because saying it out loud made the gap between where you are and where you want to be unbearably visible. Every one of those negotiations was comfort collecting its tax. And here is the sovereign truth underneath all of it. The mask was never protecting you. It was protecting the people around you from having to grow alongside you. Your shrinking was never neutral. It was a gift you kept giving away at your own expense to keep the peace in rooms that never deserved your silence. So here is the Tier 3 command, and I want you to hear it as exactly that. A command, not a suggestion. Stop editing yourself down to a size that makes other people comfortable. Say the true thing. Set the real price. Let the silence that follows be uncomfortable. That silence is not rejection. That silence is the sound of people recalculating who you actually are. You want discipline. You want confidence. You want the calm, unshakable certainty of a person who has their life assembled. Here is what nobody told you when you started wanting those things. They are not moods. They are not gifts. They are products. And every product has a price tag. You cannot wish your way into strength. You cannot manifest your way into a body you haven't trained, a business you haven't built, a mind you haven't disciplined. Every trait you admire in someone else was purchased in full, in advance, usually in private, usually while you were watching something easier. This is the part where comfort makes its final, most convincing argument. It doesn't tell you to quit. It's smarter than that. It tells you to wait. Wait for motivation. Wait for the right moment. Wait until you feel ready. But motivation was never coming to save you. Motivation is a mood, and moods are unreliable employees. The people who built the life you want did not wait to feel like doing the work. They built the identity of someone who does the work regardless of feeling, and then let the feelings catch up later, exhausted, trailing behind the evidence. Here is the chiasmus, and I want it to lodge itself somewhere you can't shake it loose. If you do what is easy, your life will be hard. If you do what is hard, your life will become easy. Comfort reverses that equation and sells you the lie in the opposite order. Easy now, easy later. No cost, no consequence. It is lying to you. It has always been lying to you. Let's make this specific, because vague inspiration is just another form of comfort. You want courage. Courage is not a feeling you wait to arrive before you speak. Courage is purchased by speaking while the fear is still present, in full, uncomfortable volume. You want patience. Patience is not purchased by hoping the waiting gets easier. It is purchased by staying in the discomfort of not knowing, long after your mind starts begging you to quit. You want focus. Focus is not a personality trait some people are born with. It is purchased by saying no to 100 smaller, easier temptations every single day, until the saying no stops requiring effort and simply becomes who you are. None of these traits arrive by by accident. Every person you admire for their discipline made a purchase you didn't witness in a moment you weren't present for, and what you're seeing now is only the receipt. There are only two kinds of suffering available to any person alive: chosen suffering, the early alarm, the cold discomfort of a hard conversation, the burn of a workout you didn't want to do, and unchosen suffering, the version that finds you anyway, later when you are least prepared for it, the body that fails because you never trained it, the relationship that collapses because you never had the hard conversation, the regret that arrives at 50, 60, 70, asking why you spent 30 years protecting a comfort that protected nothing. Chosen suffering is expensive up front and cheap over a lifetime. Unchosen suffering is free up front and devastating over a lifetime. Comfort will never tell you this trade exists. It only shows you the first half of the invoice. So stop asking for the discount. Stop looking for the version of discipline that doesn't cost anything. It does not exist, and every year you spend looking for it is a year added to the bill. The pain of discipline weighs ounces. The pain of regret weighs tons. You are going to carry one of them. That was never optional. The only thing that was ever optional is which one. Pay it now, in sweat, in early mornings, in the specific discomfort of doing the thing today instead of tomorrow. Or pay it later, in the currency of a life you spent avoiding, handed to you all at once, with interest, at the exact moment you have the least capacity left to absorb it. Here is another disguise comfort wears, and it's a clever one. Comfort doesn't just hide in rest, it hides in the craving for excitement. You picture discipline as a montage, 90 seconds of sweat and triumph, scored to music, cut together from the best moments and none of the boring ones. That montage is a lie of omission. It shows you the 2 minutes worth filming and skips the 1,800 days it took to earn them. Real progress does not feel like a montage. It feels like the same small task repeated on a day when nothing about it feels new or exciting or worth posting about. It feels like showing up to train on the day you already trained the day before, and the day before that, with no ceremony, no audience, no dopamine spike waiting for you at the finish line. This is where most people quit, not in the dramatic moments, but in the monotonous ones. They can survive the storm. What they cannot survive is the fog, the long, flat, unremarkable middle where nothing feels like it's working yet, and no one is watching to confirm that it is. Comfort thrives in exactly that fog. It tells you that if it feels boring, it must not be working, that if it isn't exciting, it isn't real progress. That's backwards. Boring is not the absence of progress. Boring is what progress actually looks like 90% of the time before it becomes visible to anyone else. So redefine the target. Stop chasing the feeling of momentum and start tolerating the monotony that momentum is actually built from. The standard is not excitement. The standard is repetition. The same discipline on the boring day with no reward in sight, executed anyway, simply because you said you would. There is a cost to this path that no one advertises, and I am not going to pretend it isn't real. The cost is distance. As you change, some of the people around you will not change with you, and the space that opens up between you will feel at first like loss. It is not loss, it is arithmetic. Trees do not grow tall by staying close to the grass. Grass spreads wide because it stays low. No resistance, no wind, no risk. A tree pays for height with exposure. It stands alone in the storm because the storm is the tax on altitude. You cannot have the height and keep the shelter. That was never on the menu. You will feel the pull to explain yourself. Don't. The moment you start explaining a decision to become disciplined, you have already handed the room permission to talk you out of it. Discipline that requires unanimous approval was never discipline. It was a group project, waiting for someone else to give you permission to want more. They will call it a phase. They will call you different, distant, intense. Let them. Marcus Aurelius did not write his private reflections to win the approval of Rome. He wrote them because he understood that the opinion of a crowd is a currency that devalues the moment you start spending your life to earn it. Here is what almost no one tells you about this trench, this uncomfortable middle distance between the old circle and the new results. It does not last forever. It only feels infinite because you're standing in it right now, with no evidence yet. Just the ache of having outgrown a version of belonging that used to be enough. The evidence comes later. It always comes later. That is the entire design of this test. You have to move before the proof exists, not after. Belief does not come first. Action comes first, and belief follows behind it, dragging its feet, showing up only once you've already done the work it was supposed to inspire. So do not wait to feel brave enough to be alone in this. You will not feel brave. You will feel exposed and slightly ridiculous and unsure if any of it is working. Move anyway. The tree does not wait to feel strong enough to survive the storm. It simply grows, and the strength is discovered as a byproduct of the growing, never before it. The instinct to compromise will follow you long after you think you've left it behind. It comes disguised as loyalty. It whispers that you were being unfair to the people who knew the old version of you, the comfortable one that never demanded more from the room. But remaining smaller than your potential just to keep an old friendship intact is not loyalty. It is mutual destruction disguised as politeness. You are keeping them comfortable, and they are keeping you weak. The people who truly belong in your future will not demand that you trim your branches so you can fit under their ceiling. They will see your growth as an invitation, not an insult. And if they can't handle the shadow you cast, that is not a problem for you to solve by shrinking. That is a sign that the room has reached its capacity. Look at how you handle the quiet hours. When the noise fades and the crowd goes home, what remains is the cold, unvarnished reality of who you actually are when nobody is watching. Most people cannot stand that quiet. They fill it with shallow noise, endless scrolling, temporary distractions, anything to avoid sitting alone with their own undeveloped potential. They treat solitude like a prison sentence when it is actually the only workshop where real strength is ever built. If you cannot endure your own company for an hour without reaching for a distraction, why should anyone else take your ambition seriously? The willingness to stand alone in a room without validation, without applause, without an audience to verify your effort is the baseline requirement for building anything that lasts. Notice how easily people confuse momentum with progress. They stay busy with small, easy tasks that give them the illusion of forward motion, while avoiding the one hard thing that would actually change their baseline. They clean the desk, organize the schedule, debate the strategy, rewrite the list, and call it work. That is not work. That is sophisticated avoidance. It is comfort wearing the mask of productivity. Real work has a specific price tag, and it is paid in the currency of friction. If what you are doing right now does not carry a cost, if it does not force your brain to sweat or your ego to step aside, you are not moving forward. You are just rearranging the furniture in a room you should have walked out of years ago. You will be tempted to measure your progress against the people you left behind. Stop looking in the rearview mirror. Comparing your stride to someone who chose to stop running is a cheap form of self-delusion designed to make you feel accomplished without doing the heavy lifting. You do not measure a mountain by looking down at the valley. You measure it by looking at the peak that is still towering above you. The standard was never the crowd. The standard was always the highest version of yourself that you are currently refusing to become. Every day you negotiate with that standard. Every time you settle for good enough, you are handing your potential back to the noise. So accept the isolation as a necessary phase of construction. You do not build a foundation while the house is full of guests. You clear the lot, dig the ground, and do the heavy, filthy work in the mud before anyone ever sees the structure. The solitude you are experiencing right now is not abandonment. It is the boundary line where your old life ends and your actual work begins. Let the noise fade out. Let the crowd move on. Stop looking for witnesses to your transformation and start doing the work that makes the transformation inevitable. Everything up to this point has been diagnosis. This last part is the prescription, and I need you to actually take it, not just listen to it and move on to the next video promising a faster fix. Your subconscious mind does not distinguish between what is real and what is repeated with enough conviction. This is not mysticism. This is how identity is built. Through repetition, not through revelation. You did not learn to doubt yourself in a single dramatic moment. You learned it through years of small, repeated evidence, stacked quietly until it became your default operating system. Which means the reverse is also true. You can install a new default. Not by hoping, by repeating a standard until your nervous system stops treating it as foreign. So here is the installation. Say it, not as a wish, but as a statement of current fact. I do not negotiate with comfort. I act before I feel ready, because feeling ready was never going to arrive on its own. I pay the price of discipline in advance, because I refuse to pay the price of regret on delivery. I do not shrink myself to keep a room comfortable. I say the true thing, and I let the silence that follows sort out who belongs near me. My isolation is not punishment. It is proof that I stopped negotiating with the grass and started growing towards something the grass will never reach. This is not a video you watch once. This is a file you run daily, until the doubt that currently runs your mornings gets evicted by repetition, the same slow, quiet way it moved in. Tomorrow morning, the alarm is going to go off, and for about 4 seconds, you are going to be exactly who you've always been. The version that negotiates, that reaches for 5 more minutes, that tells itself the real change starts Monday. You get to decide in that 4-second window whether comfort writes today's script or whether you do. The version of you that used to wait for permission is not who's getting out of bed tomorrow. Get up. Do the hard thing first. Let comfort wait outside the door for once and see how it feels to make it beg for a change.